Hi, my name is Geoff Burke. I'm a senior backup engineer at ThinkOn, a Canadian service provider. We do backups and disaster recovery for our clients. I've been in IT for about 20 years and dealing with specifically with backups and disaster recovery for 11 years. Just recently, I have turned my attention to Kubernetes data protection. And as you can see from the title of my presentation, it's a question. And it's a question that was asked, believe it or not, recently by a manager who had read an article about Pokemon Go and how Pokemon Go ran on Kubernetes and it had no downtime because it was self-healing. So he asked me, if Kubernetes is self-healing, why does my company need backup and DR plans? Well, is it really self-healing? No, not in the data protection sense. You can't self-heal from disasters, ransomware, fires. Yes, there are aliveness probes, startup probes, readiness probes. If you delete a pod in a deployment, it will recreate itself. In that sense, yes, self-healing. But when it comes to data protection, unfortunately, Kubernetes is just as vulnerable as other IT workloads from many of the same threats, as I've just mentioned. There's also the human factor, which I'll underline now, especially because there are a lot of newbies out there, like myself, who have only recently come to the world of Kubernetes, and we're going to make mistakes. I certainly have. So you not only want to protect your workloads from external threats, but you want to protect them from yourself as well. So we need backups and DR plans. What, how, where, and when? So the crucial questions that are always asked when a new technology emerges, and we need to know how to back it up. So what? Well, there's persistent data. Now, containers used to not have persistent data, but now they do, and many modern applications require it. So that is kind of similar in a way to our old workloads. They're just data that's on disk. The way we back it up is going to be different. What is very different are the objects in Kubernetes. Things like config maps, secrets, others of that type. These can be explained similar to, if you know vCloud Direct or VMware, to vApps in a way. You know, a vApp would have one or two or three VMs, and around those VMs there would be metadata. And to get a successful backup, you need to back up not just the VMs, but also the vApp metadata. So it's a bit of a stretch, but nevertheless, that maybe will help people understand. There's also the cluster database itself, where all the information about the cluster is held, and it's the etc database. That also has to be backed up, or should be backed up. How? Well, I say remember native backups. You want to use or leverage the tools that were created specifically for that technology. To give you an example of a similar situation, before Microsoft had Azure snapshots, we used to install an agent inside of the OSs in Azure and effectively treat them like physical servers. It did work, but it wasn't very effective, and it was slower, and certainly the restores would be slower and possibly more complicated. So when they introduced Azure snapshots, this was much better, and quicker restores, much more efficient. So you want efficiency and speed. Where? So where is important because there are still people who don't really think about offsite. Obviously you want to have a local backup because you want to be able to do really quick restores, but it's essential now to have offsite backups, to export your backups. We have seen many disasters in the last 20, 30 years in relation to not just buildings and infrastructure, but even at the level of power lines and whatnot, hurricanes. So you need to have your data offsite, preferably far away. So what am I going to show you here today? Well, I've installed a local instance of WordPress in my Kubernetes cluster. And for those that don't know, WordPress is a wonderful little application that will help you build a website, especially if you don't know what you're doing like me. So it's a nice little application. It has a database, MySQL, has a UI. It also has persistent storage. So it is a good mimic, let's say, of a production workload. In fact, you could call it production if you really started to use it intensely. I'm going to perform both local backups, and I'm also going to export those backups offsite to object storage. So I'm going to do what I just said was essential that you need to do to have local and to have offsite to protect yourself. I'm also going to trigger some kind of disaster, and this is not going to be like blowing up my laptop or pulling the power cord and whipping it around. It'll be something simple, like I'll delete something, but it'll be a disaster. I think I've got my photo in the WordPress, so if I delete that, that'll be a disaster. Maybe I don't, I can't remember. I'm also going to then obviously restore the application back to the pre-disaster state or the pre-change state in my case. Now to do this, I'm going to leverage Caston, because Caston is one of the applications that will allow you to do a local native snapshot in Kubernetes and also export offsite. So this is my WordPress website builder. And as you can see, I've already done a bit of work. I've called it important website, and I've called it Geoff's website. I haven't removed the default plant pictures and whatnot. I did also change the address further down here to Toronto from New York. So this is your standard application. It could be anything, but this also has, as I said before, a MySQL database, and so it's a good little representation of a production workload. Now here I have Caston, and I've been playing around with this already a bit all day long. I've got quite a bit of data backed up, and as you can see, I did a backup just recently, and I want to show you what the backup policy looks like, because it'll touch upon those points that I already talked about in the intro to my presentation. So here is my policy, and this policy, as you can see, has a daily snapshot, and it also keeps some retention, 7 daily, 4 weeklies, 12 monthly, 7 yearlies, and then very importantly exports those daily snapshots to a location called Nubov, which is actually one of our data centers in Toronto. So this is going out on the internet and is exporting them. So that's very important. Now what I'd like to do next is to actually make a change to the site and then restore it. So we can customize, and I guess changing the name would definitely, well, we could change the theme. I don't know, go crazy. Well, let's try changing the theme. So let's change the theme. See what that does. Has a little save and activate. Okay, look at that, totally different, and I've lost my plant photo. So I'm going to save and activate that. Okay. Now, luckily, I backed up just recently, as I said, my WordPress application. So I want to do a restore, and I'll go into the Applications tab here, and it's quite nice because it has unmanaged, which would show me if I had a program or an application or deployment which was not protected. The two in there are defaults, and I think the Metal LB load balancer namespace, so I don't need those. But it also shows me the ones that is compliant, and I'm going to restore from the last snapshot. So there's a bunch of them in there because I've been playing around with this, but I want to do the one from 647, and so there it is. I will press that. Comes up restore point. I could have gone from the offsite as well. It would have taken longer. So I will now press restore. It's going to ask for a confirmation. I will confirm it, and then I will wait, and it'll tell me to go back to the dashboard to wait for it to complete. Okay, we're back, and our restore application has succeeded. There's a little check mark. So I've already pressed the refresh button, and lo and behold, there we go. I've got my plant back. My important website is there. So again, I could have restored from the offsite. Instead, I chose to do local because it was quicker. But the end result is the same. I have my website back. So you can imagine if I had made an enormous amount of changes in this website, and if I had deleted it by accident or done something dumb, or if someone defaced it or whatnot, you wouldn't want to redo all the work, obviously, and the restore is what you wanted to succeed, which happened. The other thing that you can do, obviously, is restore the components or objects. So here we have the MySQL password, which is a secret in the WordPress namespace. So I am going to delete that and then restore it. So let's say secret, and it's my secret. So I'm going to delete that, and effectively what will happen is that there won't be a secret for the MySQL password, which is not very good. Okay, so we will go back now to our Caston application. There are our restore points, and let's see if we can just restore that secret. So here we go. It's saying, what do you want to select? I'm going to deselect everything, and I'm going to find that secret. Hopefully it's backed up. Yes, it is. Okay, so there it is. That's the one I deleted. So we're going to say, okay, restore that. I was silly. I deleted it. We're going to restore that. And it's telling us that basically it's going to restore 1 of 10 spec artifacts. Okay, go ahead. It's going to submit it. This should be relatively quick, I'd imagine. As you can see, it's pending. It's going to start off. And, well, it looks like it completed already. So let's take a look. I don't want to delete it again. Let's get our secrets and see what we can see. Boom, it is there. So you can clearly see that I deleted that secret, which is an object in the namespace. And it is now back to normal. So let's make certain that our site is working effectively. In fact, I should have probably tried the site to see if it was no longer working. So I refreshed it and it's fine. So as you can see, very important, you can also restore individual components. And obviously anything that's not very big, like a secret, is a very quick restore. And believe me, I have done that kind of mistake. I have deleted secrets, I've deleted config maps, I have changed config maps to something that I could not even recognize. So the ability to restore them back to where they were before I played with them is very important. So just to look at our components that are in this WordPress, and keep in mind that you can restore any of them. We restored the entire application after we made the changes. We then restored a secret, but we could have restored individual objects that are here, and then there's the WordPress. So I just wanted to show that. There's a service, 2 services in fact. One's exposed externally, persistent volume claims, and the 2 pods. So all these could be restored individually, and you can also migrate these out. Now keep in mind with migration, there are some extra things that you have to do. Obviously, the question is, well, what if I'm using AWS, or I'm using another cloud provider, or just a different setup of Tanzu or OpenShift? Well, obviously there's going to be a difference in storage, that's for certain. So you need to choose an application which can do some kind of transformation, which can allow you to tell the restore that you, for instance, are going from a Rook Ceph storage setup to something else, vSAN or something on Tanzu. Caston does have that, but you would need to do that for migration. So keep that in mind. Okay, some final thoughts. A DR plan is only as good as the last test. You want to really test your DR plan often, and I guess the important factor here is how often is your infrastructure changing? How often are your applications changing, your deployments? If they're changing on a regular basis, you want to test your DR plan on a regular basis. One of the worst things that can happen is that a person does a DR test, organization does a DR test, and then leaves it for a few years. Meanwhile, during that time period, there have been large changes to their infrastructure, organization, applications, whatnot. They have a disaster and boom, they're not really prepared for it. Now, I've restored customers from situations like that, but it takes a lot longer and a lot more nerve-wracking. And certainly people don't have much time when there's a disaster. They need to get back up and running quickly. Recovering from disasters requires options too. When I say options, I mean that you want to try to leverage all the possibilities that are out there. So not just local, not just remote, but if, for instance, an application offers immutability, if there are also possibilities of exporting to tape, anything extra will help. You never know what won't work in a disaster recovery situation. Of course, if you test it off, and there won't be that many surprises. Be ready to migrate. This is more from my experience with virtualization, but we've had to migrate customers from Hyper-V to VMware, for instance, and do some other migrations very, very ad hoc just because of given circumstances. So in this case, it'd be more like, okay, be ready to go from a kubeADM, let's say, to something AWS, something of that nature. So you want to have an application which can allow you to do those kind of transformations like I talked about before. And review your plan often. So you're not only going to test your plan, you need to review your plan. So people have to sit down and decide who does what, have some options there as far as who to contact, that kind of thing. It seems like a simple thing, but you'd be surprised how often that's forgotten. And but it becomes very important during a disaster event. Okay, I hope this has been interesting. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the KubeCon conference.